In the last video, we derived the product rule. I just got the result written up here on the board. Things are in a little bit different order than they were when we did the derivation. This is the order in which I usually think through it. It's not the order in which things are given in your textbook. What's important is not the order in which you do things, because we're just adding and multiplying and order doesn't matter. What's important is that you have two terms, that each of those terms involves one original function and the derivative of the other, and that in the process you use all four of these functions, the two originals, f and g, and their two derivatives, f prime and g prime. Okay. I've written it in the order that I usually use it as I work through problems. But if you wrote this as g of x times f prime of x, that's fine. If you wrote this term first and this term second, that's fine. Okay. All right. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about to what extent you're responsible for the derivation that we did in the last video. I do not expect you to memorize it. I do not want you to regurgitate it. Okay? But if I just say you're not responsible for it, a lot of you wouldn't study it. And I think there's a lot of value in studying it to see how we get from here to here. So, as we worked through this, every time I said one thing was equal to another, remember I was writing down a reason for that. Sometimes it was just a description of the algebra that I was doing. I added 0 and that doesn't change the value. I distributed the division. Sometimes it was a limit law that I was using. We used the product and the sum rules of limits in deriving this formula. So what you are responsible for is on an exam or a quiz, I might work out the derivation of the product rule, but I might leave some of those reasons blank and ask you to fill in, why is this thing equal to that thing? Give me a reason. How did I get there? Okay? And don't just memorize what we did in the last video. I don't have it memorized. Now, I did it without referring to my notes because I've done it often enough that I understand the process. But I often do it a little bit differently each time. Okay. Sometimes I'll do 2 algebra things in one step, or use 2 limit laws in one step. Sometimes I'll break those up into separate steps. So if you memorize exactly what we did in the last video, it might not match what you might see on a future exam or quiz. The idea is for you to read it and understand it. If so, when I do something similar, you'll be able to explain why this thing is equal to this thing, why I can go from one step to the next. What I want to do in this video is just apply the product rule to this product. I mentioned this in the very first video from this section, that we couldn't do this by simplifying the multiplication first. We needed the product rule for something like this. And I'm just going to show you how I usually work through the product rule. Right now, the product rule is new. So you have to remember what the product rule is, and in doing that, you also have to evaluate the derivatives of some individual functions. That feels a little bit like multitasking. I'm going to try to do this one step at a time. I'm going to first remember the formula, and then go back and evaluate the derivatives of any pieces that I need to. Okay. So what I will do is say, okay, so I've got this product, so it's going to be the derivative of the first piece times the second piece, plus the first piece times the derivative of the second piece. So that was just writing out what the product rule is. Each term is one derivative, one original function. Okay. All right, and this d by dx notation is really helpful because it tells me, hey, I got to evaluate the derivative of that piece. So then I go back, and in the next step, I evaluate those derivatives. The derivative of x is just 1 times e to the x. Now, I don't have to write that 1. If you feel comfortable saying, hey, 1 times this is just e to the x, that's totally fine. Okay, plus x, and then the derivative of e to the x is just e to the x. So what we get is e to the x plus x e to the x. Now, as you get more comfortable with derivatives, you may feel comfortable going right from here to here. Just sort of mentally saying the derivative of x is 1 times e to the x gives me e to the x. Plus x times the derivative of e to the x is e to the x. That gives me my second term. But while you're learning and while this is new, I think it's worthwhile to take the time to say, this is my formula for product rule. Now I'll go back and evaluate all of those d by dx's. Okay. So just a suggestion so that you don't make careless mistakes because you're trying to do too much at once.